audience? Oh no, just you guys. Okay, there we go. KSP up. Okay, we're live. So yeah, it's like as like we actually deal with these issues going forward. It's like we always have to remember that. We all have it. I do, but I do it too, where we will have a tendency to want to yank it to a singular meaning, when that is not necessarily the case. Um, because Dante himself rarely ever speaks in singular meaning, and when he does, on a point like that, it is usually that has a singular meaning, but all the context around it has social commentary, which then gives multi layers to the meaning. Because while he is talking about stuff in the story, he is putting them in his allegorical proxies of real world politics and socioeconomics that he's dealing with in the greater commentary. So it's like, even the few times in the story when he is highly specific, he is being highly specific to then turn it into an allegory of the wider world outside of the story.
Oh, and I did confirm, Rich, that Proserpina is the Roman version of Persephone.
Yeah, and like this is what I'm getting at is like, even when he goes singular, highly singular meaning, it's not a singular meaning. Now this time it's multiple meanings within the context of this particular line. You're muted, Rich.
So it seems to me that the difference is that his contemporary scholars conflated the two gods because maybe it wasn't clear in the text. But the later scholars seem to all pretty much unanimously agree that this is the god of wealth and not the god of the underground. So there was some shift in interpretation at some point.
Well, yeah, but that, as I was pointing out, that comes from a shift in interpretation of the Greek, not the Roman, because of the later reabsorption of Greek knowledge back into Europe. Greater understanding came to these gods, so we have to operate under the information that Dante would have been operating under, where those were one and the same.
Wait, so you're saying, but Plato is a Roman name. Pluto is a Roman name, right? It would have been Hades.
Yeah, but therefore he only had the Roman interpretation where it
was there a Greek
god.
version of Plutus?
No, Pluto
No,
was the
Plutos
Greek.
was the Greek.
Yeah, Pluto and Plutus are both Greek names, but what we're talking about is it was before the reinduction of more Greek text. That Pluto, Hades, the god who kidnapped Persephone, was the god of wealth. They were not two separate individuals. The temples to Pluto were also temples to the god of wealth and the underworld. They were not separate deities in Rome at that time.
Well, hold on. Pluto's Roman equivalent is Dispater.
But it was not. That's why I'm talking specific. We have greater knowledge now than they did in the 1300s. That's my point. At that point, it was the same god. And I know this because that is still taught in because other texts still use this particular interpretation, because those authors were also under this educational principle that they were one and the same. They were different aspects of the same god, but that was the brother of Zeus that we're talking about. And Zeus only had two. There wasn't a fucking, a fourth Zeus brother, like, chilling in the waiting rings like he was a Jonas brother. That doesn't work that way.
Okay, here we go. The Roman name for Pluto is Pluto. The Roman mythology is the god of the world, and he's the equivalent of Hades. Whereas the Roman name for Plutus is Plutus, but the Greek name is Plautos.
Yeah, it's Plautos, which is Pluto, Plauton, which was Plutus. But interestingly, Pluto was actually a Greek name first. It was just a different name for Hades. So
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at. Is
something I didn't realize.
This was not originally delineated into two separate deities. It did later become so, but not then.
Wait, there was not a difference between Hades and Plautos?
No, not
About
in 14th century. They would not have had this delineating difference like we have today. They would not have known this. We do. They don't. For a third time. Like that's the whole point I've been saying this whole time, which is why he does not delineate, yet later people did, because those later people had the greater information that Dante did at the time. Because many Romans did not even do this delineation. I don't understand. So why if in Roman society this was not delineated to this degree, you would think that it would be in the average text either. Like that doesn't make sense. That didn't happen until later discoveries. It's just how that works, unfortunately, when it comes to this shit. So like when you're talking about period specific knowledge, yeah, it's wrong. But it wasn't wrong to them, which is why we have to interpret it that way to them, because that's how they thought of it.
So we've already been through the city of Dis, right?
No, we're coming up to the city
I was
of
about
Dis.
to say that's coming up next canto or canto 8.
Yeah.
I forget.
Apparently, the city of Dis is named after Hades, whose Greek name, Roman name would have been, just as I said before, was Dis something.
Yeah.
The Roman name of Hades. Yeah, Dispater. So his
the non
Roman name
Orcus.
yeah,
his
the
Roman
non-father.
name would be Dispater. So there must be, so there is a delineation between Dis and
Yes,
Pluto.
but this comes from the Romans adding an aspect to Pluto that was not in the Greek. He became the non-father. Jupiter became the father. That's why Dispater, like literally, look at the etymology of the root,
Yeah.
the roots of the word. Like this is when
Just the
Pluto
father.
became the great adversary. Whereas in Greek mythology, Zeus and Hades worked together on multiple occasions. So did Poseidon. Like they were not enemies in the same way that they became in Roman mythology.
Right, but wouldn't you if Pluto is Hades, if the Pluto in Dante is Dis, then wouldn't you expect him to be in the city of Dis?
What I'm trying to say is, in the 14th century, to Dante, it would have been one and the same god, just different names for that god. They would not have been two. It would have, think of it like Janus, two different faces of the same god, not different god entities.
Yeah, I don't. To me, that doesn't make sense. Like, I understand why you're saying it, but I still, because of Dis is a separate thing, then I just assume that Pluto is Pluto and he's not Dis.
Well, again, we are working from more perfect knowledge than they did, so we have to work within the mythology of the time period. And
We seem to have enough
no,
knowledge to know that Dis was not Plato.
Yes, but
Not
what you were talking about is what higher priests and highly educated people would have known. The average person, there was no difference. It was the same temple. Therefore,
Yeah,
same
so what
God.
you're saying is it's right. So what you're saying is this verse is easily misinterpreted.
Yes. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying they were wrong.
Yeah, yes, the early interpreters. You're saying his contemporaries, like the 13th century, the guy who thought.
Well, and Dante himself, because he also would have had this misinterpretation.
I don't think he would have made this a separate character otherwise.
I do, because of the multi-layers of meaning, and we actually get the same entity used in multiple places in other cases of spirit and show. And so it's not uncommon for
anybody
him to do
can. Anybody has like the freedom of interpretation, of course.
It is worth noting that Dis in Dante is not a character; it is a city.
Right.
In as much as a non-person can be a character, which obviously a city can be a character, but the point that I'm making here is that like the personification that he gives to Pluto, as he calls it, and the identity that he gives to the city, which he calls it Dite, do suggest a clear distinction, which suggests that he was more meaning to imply Plutus, the god of wealth, as opposed to Pluto, the ruler of the underworld. But again, I'm slowly kind of getting, because like even within Greek and Roman mythology, Pluto and Plutus were often conflated. So there's
and therefore the wider general accepted knowledge of this time was they were two faces of the same deity, and this was an interpretation that was given much by their interpretation of the god Janus.
Ah, wait a minute. It just occurred to me. Hades is both a god and a place, right? You go to Hades.
No, you go to
Yes.
well,
You go to Hades.
that became conflated later. Originally, that was you went to Tartarus, and
Well,
Tartarus
later
was the
is
body.
what- Yeah,
but you are
Dante
correct.
would have been more familiar with the later traditions than the earlier traditions. So making Dis a place makes sense.
Yeah, it's yeah. This is kind of what I'm getting at. They were working from incomplete, imperfect knowledge, and therefore we have to work within their incomplete, imperfect knowledge. When we are trying to say what he said, we can then say greater meanings and how this can be interpreted and all that. But
now
how
it makes
he
more
meant it.
sense to me that modern scholarship has all moved to the notion that Pluto, the god of wealth, is not the same as Hades or Dis, because Dis is a separate character, and when I say character, I mean place. Just like later Greek tradition has Hades being both a god and a place.
Yes, exactly. It's kind of. I mean, you touched on it better because of the adding the locational element to it as well.
Yeah,
But
it didn't occur to me until I was just like, "What? Why is Dis a place and not just a discrete god?" And then it occurred to me that, oh yeah, that's true in Greek mythology too.
yeah, and when
Okay.
you look
That
at
makes-
older Greek mythology, originally you went to Tartarus because the underworld is the body of an ancient or a more
Sure,
ancient god, and it
Right.
became Hades because Hades was the guardian of that.
Or Tartarus became like a region of Hades, right?
it is something
The deepest pit of Hades was still referred to as Tartarus at that time. Yes.
it is worth noting that Dis, which is a shortening of Dispater, which actually comes from Ditis Patris, is a contraction
does that
of.
etymology work as well for non-father, like I was taught?
No, well, no, that's what I'm getting into. It actually refers to a wealthy father, because Dis, the Latin adjective dives, which means wealthy or rich.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
So what I was taught was
means
also out of date as well. So
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Dispater would be more like rich father.
Yeah. So, which when we were talking about again going back to the Greyhound portion of the cantos previous, the one who foregoes the wealth is the good one. So again, this delineation would make sense to include this kind of like secondary.
What circle is the city of Dis in?
Fourth.
Yeah, next.
We're literally about to come to the city of Dis in the fourth circle.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was fourth or fifth, but I knew we were about to come to it. We hadn't passed it yet.
Yeah. So the name, even the Italian name of the city, Ditis, would be referencing the name of wealth. Yeah.
Okay, this is interesting. So Plutus, the Pluto that we run into that keeps getting translated into Plutus, guards the fourth circle. So you have to get past him in order to get into the fourth circle.
Yeah.
But that third circle that Plutus is in is associated with overindulgence, right? Which makes sense for him, the god of riches, to be there. But the city of Dis is on the other side, which means that it's associated with wastefulness or prodigality.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that they were mentioning is, what was it? Ah, yes, In the Italian commentary I translated, Pluto is depicted as avarice and greed, and on the contrary, prodigal and spendthrift. So Dante torments them together. Although they sin in different ways, they have the same intention. That is, they gain honor, fame, and power from growing. The miser believes he can spend at his will and acquire friends at his will. The prodigal spends to keep and acquire friends.
Presumably, you would want Saturn would appear in this circle if he were to appear.
Who?
Because he has the same associations with abundance.
He's talking about Uranus, Saturn.
Oh no, Saturn is not Uranus.
Oh no, Kronos. Sorry.
Kronos. Yes, yeah. Kronos. But as a Titan, you wouldn't. I don't think even Dante would have placed Titans in this. In this context.
And Kronos isn't the god of wastefulness or the Titan of wastefulness. He is quite literally the Titan of time.
No, I would put him in third circle, not fourth.
No, but what I mean is, if anything, Saturn would appear in purgatory if he was going to appear at all.
There are 4 Titans in Inferno.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
We'll come across them.
Well, I'm just talking about where Kronos would appear. At least in my opinion, he would appear in purgatory, not hell. It would make the temporal void. He is time and timelessness. He would represent.
I mean, of course the planets will be in heaven, right? But those aren't the gods.
No, I was talking if Dante was going to include Saturn in that way, I would have him included in purgatory because of the timeless aspect.
Are there any pagan gods in purgatory?
No, there's not. But that's where I would do it if he was to include it. Because it would be the one place where Kronos, or Saturn, would have influence. Which is on the spanning void of time, which is how purgatory is viewed. Especially in this time period. You gotta remember, infinity is barely a fucking concept to mathematicians at this point.
So there are gods, mentioned in both Purgatorio and Paradiso, but as allegories, they're not actually they don't appear, they don't make it to heaven or anything.
Oh, I didn't think they would. That wasn't my supposition.
But Apollo is invoked in Paradiso.
This is all I'm saying is if Saturn was going to be one of the ones brought up, or Kronos was one of the ones that was to be brought up, I can't think of any certain.
But they wouldn't be present. I can't see Dante putting any pagan god in either Purgatory, or he can just at best just not mention them.
Well, it depends on how we're taking it, because again, he wouldn't do this. We're applying an intention. We have no idea what he wouldn't do. We only know what he did do.
Well, we know he didn't, right? I mean,
that's what
he sets up. There can be only one God, right? And, trying to be a second God in Dante's world, I don't think is a thing.
No, but he brings up these entities as they are viewed by the demonological world of the Catholicism of the 1300s and 1400s, 1200s more specifically, where these gods were no longer gods, they are demons. This doesn't matter if they're in hell. It's not a matter of a god being there. There's a demon there.
Yeah, they're all demons. Yeah, for sure.
And that's so that is an immaterial point to somebody in the 14th century, because Kronos, Pluto, all these they were gods, but they're demons. So including them in hell would never be an eschatological issue for them. That just wouldn't be. It's therefore, we may have. Dante wouldn't do this. He could have. He just didn't. We don't know why he did or did not. Except for, at least in my opinion, he did not have a literary tool used for including it to also breach with the wider commentary he was doing. He didn't include it because he didn't personally have a use for it in this story. is the only way I can interpret it.
Yeah. Right. I mean, he only had so much time. But I'm just saying
That reference would have been on a different social commentary than what he was trying to talk about here, and he would have used that reference in De Monarchia or one of his other works. That's all I'm getting at. It's like he would have used it elsewhere because he didn't use it here if he used it.
Let's see. What pagan gods appear in the comedy? They all appear in Inferno, but Minos, Cerberus, Plutus, Phlegius,
Cerberus
the
is.
Furies. Well, that makes sense. Medusa, the Minotaur.
Oh god. Okay, I want to smack this list. These are not fucking gods.
Centaurs. I know.
Well,
the Furies are gods.
you didn't say gods though. You said mythological figures.
No,
I said what pagan gods appear in
you
the
said
comedy?
pagan
okay.
god. That's why I wanted to smack the list. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. That's not a fucking god.
Well, Minos, Plutus, Phlegius, the
No.
Furies.
Yeah, no, the Furies, and you said Minotaur, and you said
Yeah. They're
Cerberus.
non-gods.
Yeah, I was like, there was things on this list that are not like the others.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm sure if I challenged it on some of these not being gods, it would say.
Yeah, it's just because I understand there are certain things that he will and will not do. We don't know why though. We don't, and that's why I don't like trying to intimate that level of intent. I can go contextually. He didn't include it at any of the points where it would have made relevant sense of either time or avarice, the two aspects of Kronos.
The Furies are gods, right?
No.
No,
Really?
the Furies are children of gods, but they are not. They would be considered demigods at best.
Because they were. No, they would be considered like the 100-handed ones. They're not gods or demigods. They're that middle ground, like the Cyclopeans were.
The Furies are also known as the Irenaeans. I mean, I can tell you this: they're referred to specifically as gods in the Oresteia because they end up going to battle with Apollo, and it's intimated that it would be an even battle, and it would be harmful to the cosmos if they were to fight.
Well,
and that's why Athena comes down and breaks it up.
But that's the implication of wars between immortals. Period. It's the same implication between the war between the gods and the giants. You don't have to be a god to be an immortal primordial energy that could affect the cosmos if you go to war, because there is literally no killing you. That's an intimation, in my opinion.
But they're called gods. They're called gods in the in the third one, the Eumenides.
I'm just saying. I think that's an intimation as opposed to a literary, because at least in all the Greek legends, I can see nowhere they're called gods.
Okay, so I mean, based on their origin, I can't see them as being anything else. So the Furies or the hold on, Irenaeans, yeah, that's a weird fucking
Yeah, the
word.
kindly ones. That's what they get renamed.
Anyways,
after
so
they become
in
judges.
In Hesiod's Theogony, they were created when the Titan Cronus castrated his father and threw his genitalia into the sea. They emerged from the drops of blood which fell in the earth.
Very similar to other gods.
Whereas Aphrodite was born on the crest of the sea foam, so it would put them at the same level as
but not all immortals were gods. That's my point. I'm not questioning their immortality or power, just their godliness, because there is a delineation between them. That's all.
I mean, yeah. So far as I can see, everyone seems to refer to Eumenides as chthonic goddesses. So.
Yeah. Whereas the way it was taught to me and viewed by the wide majority, there's even argumentation that Aphrodite is a goddess. She is
Sophocles calls them
a part Titan in certain portions of the mythology, and that This is why I go.
He's also calls them gods.
I'm not saying they were
Oedipus
never
Colonus.
called God. It's not my claim here. I'm saying they were different than gods. They were of the same immortal caste, much like the giants.
Well, I think what you mean to say is they're not Olympian gods.
So,
well, that is how they delineated gods from the Titans or the giants, who were of similar power, similar immortality, so on and so forth, similar abilities to influence the spheres of nature, so on. But there were the giants, the Titans, and the gods. So, well, I would agree they are deities if we're going to get into that kind of delineation of highly finited term. But they would not be gods in the mythology. They would just be fellow immortals, much like Aphrodite was not considered a goddess in certain aspects of Greek mythology because she was not birthed like the rest of the gods. She was actually birthed separately. Same with what's her name? Birthed from fucking Zeus's skull. Fucking goddamn it.
you're thinking Athena.
Athena, yeah. Athena birthed literally, she was not technically considered a goddess because of the way that she was created. She was immortal, she was of equal power, but she was not a goddess in the same way.
Athena was not a goddess?
Not originally, no. Because she was born of a different means. It changed as time went.
We are talking about Dante. So
I think it's worth, since we're talking about Dante, it's worth looking at the story of the Furies within the Aeneid, since that's what he drew on so heavily for all of this mythology, in which they were daughters of Pluto and Nyx, which means they would be being directly descended from two gods would make them gods. That is.
And I just looked up a chthonic deity is a god or a goddess associated with the earth or the underworld of various mythologies.
Well, yeah, that's because of the way we interpret deity. God damn it, I hate doing this with you sometimes, Rich. The way they use the word at that time is different than we used it now. This is why I keep delineating. Yes, the Titans also are considered deities by our modern interpretation. They were not gods by these people's interpretation.
Okay, so you're saying that if we look up an Italian commentary from his time...
No, I'm talking about the
Greek... The Furies will not be referred to as gods in any of the commentaries.
No. Jesus Christ, Rich, no.
No, he's talking about the Greeks. Whether or not the Greeks believe them to be gods or some other form of immortal power being.
This we are still taking these thousands of years out of context by fucking 14th century Italy.
I'm trying to put it back into context because we're reading Dante, so I want to know whether or not Dante is approaching the Furies as gods.
I don't believe so. He could, but at least, by the way, I would read that because of the way they read it, at least in medieval Europe outside of Italy. The children of gods were not always gods themselves. Even if they were both children of gods, it would depend on if they were major or minor deities, if the children themselves would be labeled as god or monster or demon. It wasn't always necessarily god. I don't know at that point. But
of course, you wouldn't call them gods, you would call them false gods, right? You would call all the gods false gods.
Well, yeah, but that delineation is implied just because we're talking about a Catholic. Honestly, I didn't think that point needed to be pointed out here. I'm just pointing, maybe he would have, but at least from what the rest of medieval Europe viewed him as, they were more monsters like Gorgons as opposed to children of gods as interpreted as the Aeneid, where it was the children's Pluto and Nyx, when we know, according to the mythology, that isn't how they were created. I don't know what he was taking it from specifically, how he would have interpreted it. Maybe is the best
Interesting, the Furies are still the Furies in this, right? So the transformation of them into the Eumenides apparently doesn't happen in Dante's world.
Or he didn't acknowledge it for storytelling aspects. That part we didn't.
He doesn't know Greek, of course. He wouldn't have known about how the Furies were transformed. He would just know what the Furies originally were. unless somebody, unless that story of them turning into the entities like exists in a Latin work somewhere.
Well, and we'd have to dig into it, and that's kind of what I'm going at. Is like maybe is the best I can give you with what we have here, because he still calls them the Furies. He still calls, he still uses Pluto. He goes back and forth on what even they knew at the time. So I don't know what he's like. All I can do is best guess, without more information. Is really
That
what
won't
I
be
can say.
until Canto 9, which is will be in a couple weeks.
And hopefully we have Eucharist here who has all those extra books on his shelf behind him and fucking knows where to instantly start reaching for them.
Yeah. Well, after his move, I'm sure he'll be way more available. Oh, interesting. Hades is a chthonic deity.
Yes, well, that would make sense, given the chthonic deities are those which are, under the ground.
All right. All right. That makes sense.
And all I'm pointing to is, yes, the way we use the word deity in Latin transformed the word God into deity. It delineated all gods into a singular category of if you are this, you are a god. Whereas in the ancient Greek mythology, the giants weren't gods. They were as powerful, and in some cases
No,
more
I
powerful
understand.
than
The
the gods.
giants and the titans are not gods, but the Furies really are referred to as goddesses in multiple works.
I'm saying, at least according to what I know, that changed over time. That's all I'm getting at. And he may have viewed them as
Sure.
goddesses. He may not have. I don't know how he viewed them personally. And by the way, he references them in the work. He does not specifically call them gods, goddesses, or demons. So, like, he doesn't even give us the same delineating language that we have for the other ones that he brings up. I just don't know. Like that one, we need more context than what we have currently in this conversation. I should say, because I'm sure the context is there. We
I,
just don't
I
have it
think the
right now.
compromise is to say they're not Olympian gods, right? So they're not.
By modern
Aren't there just
interpretation,
12
I can
Olympian
agree with.
gods?
Uh, no, there's many, many more Olympian gods than the 12. We refer to them as the Big 12. The 12
Hmm.
major Olympian deities but the minor Olympian deities like Hecate.
I'm I'm having trouble I'm having trouble finding any reference to the idea that Athena was at any point not considered a god, simply because, like, the city of Athens being where she drew her name from, like, her creation within the mythology would have
And she's
put
in the
her as a
12. Like,
would have put her as a god in like a primary sense. Okay.
both titans preceded the gods, though, right? Don't titans come from the same set of parents? Like Gaia and whatever? Athena springs from the head of Zeus. She's literally a headache. Now, I realize the limitations that I keep using ChatGPT, but I asked a question very simple. Was Athena ever not considered a god in Greek mythology? And the answer is in Greek mythology, Athena has always been considered a goddess. She is one of the major deities of the Greek pantheon and holds a significant and respected position as a goddess of wisdom, war, and crafts. Yeah. What do we consider the oldest? Has it Hesiod? Like, what's our oldest? Like,
Yeah, Hesiod's theogony seems to be the oldest record we have of the Greek. Yeah. So besides theogony, we have Homer's poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Um,
so when the 5 siblings of Zeus were swallowed by Kronos, Athena had not yet been born.
correct.
So maybe there's some sort of delineation between the original 6 and the 12. This is interesting. Tartarus is also both a primordial deity and a place.
Yes.
So it makes sense. Like if we keep seeing stories like this that you can be a god and a place at the same time, then it makes sense that he's treating Dis in this way.
Yes. Yeah, well, the idea of especially for those gods of the underworld, the idea of the place or the god and the place sharing a name seems to be pretty common.
And it makes sense too because Minos spiraling down like a snake, and hell is them basically walking on Minos's back.
Yeah.
So Minos is literally both a god and a place.
Hmm.
Well, this is interesting. So chaos, so even Gaia comes from something, right? Gaia springs out of chaos.
Yes.
But interestingly, other creatures spin out of chaos. And one of them is Eros. So Eros is one of the original gods. Like, doesn't have a parent, springs out of chaos. That's the power of erotic love. It's like deep, like, original. Whereas wisdom comes relatively later in the line.
1 second.
Multiple generations later.
Crap. Well,
It's
actually,
almost like they're describing the lizard brain as opposed to having
well,
the frontal cortex.
I'm going to cut the recording because I just realized that when I switched to my phone to walk the dog, I can keep talking to you, but OBS is not going to pick it up. I was like, shit, I was just about to hit join voice on the other thing, and I'm like, oh crap, that's about to like complete, because I don't have it synced through the computer. So I'm going to cut the second stream
It's
here.
the only
If
element of
you're
human
talking
thought.
right now, Jack, we can't hear you.
Oh, is Jack muted? No.
He's not muted in Discord, but We're not getting input from his
Might
mic.
have some microphone problems.
Okay, what I was saying
There it
is
is.
I was about to switch over to the phone and join the call again and keep going, and then I realized OBS isn't going to pick me up unless I basically link my phone through the computer so that it's basically mirrored here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to end the secondary stream here, but I'm going to rejoin while I walk the dog so we can keep talking. I'm just going to switch over. So sorry to cut it a little bit short on your stream, but I may be back later. If not, catch you next week.